How's my favorite class today? Today in sociology, we're going to talk about culture. Sociologists break down culture according to 5 component parts. And the 5 component parts that they use to distinguish between or amongst cultures, or break them down, are symbols, language, values, norms, and religion or traditions. Symbols, language, values, norms, religion, or traditions. So let's talk about each one. What is a symbol? A symbol is something that represents something else. A symbol is something meaningful. A symbol gives you an overview, or a symbol makes a statement. For example, here's a symbol. If I walk around and I'm showing this symbol, that means I'm in a committed relationship. Symbols can also elicit an emotional response. If, for example, someone views this symbol and they're recently divorced, their visceral reaction might be entirely different from the emotions of someone who is recently married and very happy in the honeymoon phase. They look at this symbol and the emotions they elicit in themselves are different. Okay, symbols. Our culture could not exist without symbols because symbols make a statement. They provide a shared meaning in our culture, or in any culture. Okay, language. Language is a series of symbols used to express ideas. Language allows us to think and communicate our thoughts with one another. Language is very important. The umbrella grouping of language would be individual languages, but cultures evolve inside of the umbrella of the language. They're individual cultures that form inside of broader umbrella coverings. For example, I'm Generation X, and with Generation X, within my culture of Generation X people, if I use the term sick, that means illness. If I'm sick, it means I'm ill. Generation Z, the new generation of students going through the schools now, if they use the word sick within the confines of their culture, that means good. That bicycle is sick. That means that bicycle is very nice. That is a good bicycle. What else can I use? Bridge. I'm in Nova Scotia. If I say my bicycle that I just talked about is out on the bridge, that means to people in Nova Scotia, that means your bicycle is on the thing that's going across the creek. That's what it means. However, if I'm in Newfoundland and I say the bicycle is out on the bridge, that means it's on their front step. So language can help create boundaries for cultures. Language. Okay, what else? Values. So we've talked about symbols, we've talked about language, next is values. Values are like the yin-yang. They are 2 components that are at opposite ends of the spectrum. So values, an example of values would be he's cowardly or he's very brave. An example of values would be he's strong, he's weak. An example of values would be she's young or she's old. An example of values would be she's good or she's bad. Values are opposite ends of the spectrum, and values are very important in a culture. Values are very important because they justify behavior. We use them to justify behaviors in culture. That's why we hold them to such high esteem, values. Okay, so we've talked about symbols, we've talked about language, we've talked about values, and now we're going to talk about norms. Norms are established rules of behavior within the confines of a group, within the confines of a culture. Established rules of behavior within that culture. Okay, they're very important. Very strong norms are referred to as mores. In mores, more comes from the root word, the same root word as the English word of morality. So mores and morality with the same root word gives you a basic understanding of the same thing. Morality is basically an overview or perspective of your interpretation or a cultural interpretation of justice and a cultural interpretation of taboo. So that's the norms. Religion is the last one. And a religion is basically an overview of your or of a culture's behaviors and beliefs and practices and worldview. So religion would be a culture's worldview and behaviors and practices. I'm going to end it there with religion because in the next chapter we're going to spend a great deal of time on religion. We're going to get into individual components of religion and etc. So I'm just going to end it there. So right now we know that the component parts of culture, the building blocks of culture, of all cultures, and how they are measured are their symbols, their language, their values, their norms, and their religions or traditions. Okay. Now, I just want to spend a minute and talk about Canadian culture. So what are the symbols, values, language, and norms of Canadian culture and religion of Canadian culture? Well, you guys can think about that on an individual basis. What are they? But I want to bring up a survey that was done a few years back by Ipsos Reid. And sociologists typically use in their research surveys. So that's why I bring up the survey. This survey asked the question to Canadians, almost 500,000 Canadians, 400 and some thousand across Canada, what it means to be Canadian. What does Canadian culture mean to you? What is the culture of Canada that you like? And the number one response from those almost 500,000 people was equality, fairness in a democratic society. And I thought that was really nice because you were at the pinnacle in a culture when the culture feels collectively that equality and fairness and democracy are the keystones of the culture. The culture is at its apex when everybody in the culture, all respondents, agree that democracy and equality and fairness are the key things that we want in Canadian culture. Pretty impressed. Second was consultation and dialogue. Consultation and dialogue. So I was very impressed to read that survey. Anyway, boys and girls, that's your lesson for today. Components of culture in Sociology 12, and they are symbols, language, values, norms, religion, or tradition. Have a nice day.